And welcome back to Across the Board with Ian the Colonel here on hawkradio.org and acrosstheboardradio.com. Now, when you think of books, things that you want to hear about a book as an author or as a reader are page turner, couldn't put it down, that sort of thing. An author that has done that in both of his books, and I need this guy to write something else, is Matthew Polly. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be on. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking the time. I'll tell you, you have balls, my man. I don't know how to start with anything other than that. You wrote American Shaolin and Tapped Out. It's several years apart, but let's talk about them. In order here. So, American Shaolin. You're a 19-year-old guy living in Kansas. And you describe yourself as sort of a weakling and sort of almost cowardly, and almost in your own words there.
Mm-hmm.
And you just decide, hey, wouldn't it be sweet if I become a badass and move to China and train with the Shaolin monks, which I don't even know if they really exist or not.
Right.
And then you get on a plane, not knowing where Shaolin is, land in China, and then just start randomly asking people, hey, where's the Shaolin temple?
I was definitely young and crazy back then.
and then you proceed to find it, and eventually you train for 2 years with the Shaolin monks, and just an amazing story. I'll tell you, I love the book. Obviously, it was beautifully written. It was humorous. I learned about Chinese culture. I learned about discipline. And about finding yourself as a human. I mean, you went through so many things. Talk a little bit about the book to all of our listeners that aren't familiar with it.
Well, thank you for the intro. That was very overly kind of you. But,
no.
When I was 19, when I was growing up, I was kind of that 98-pound nerdy weakling who got picked on the playground. And I remember being young and watching the TV show Kung Fu with David Carradine.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like he was as nerdy-looking as I was, but he kicked butt. So I always had stuck in my head this idea, this kind of fantasy that if you studied with the Shaolin monks, you would learn how to be a great warrior. And then when I was in college, I found out that someone said it could possibly existed, and I ran over there, as you said, and studied with them. The amazing thing to me was they call it eating bitter, the idea that you have to suffer to learn Kung Fu. And so there were like 10,000 young Chinese kids, and all they did 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, was study Kung Fu. And that's what I did with them for 2 years.
Yeah, and you really did suffer through so many things. And not only that, but it was a great description of the poverty that people in China in the outskirts and, the rural areas, I guess, live through. That one of your teacher's fathers lived under the stairs, he and his family, in like a broom closet. And you talked about that, and it's just amazing, and how the economy works there, and there's a lot of, or at least it was at that point, a lot of corruption with the police force and that sort of thing. Fascinating, and one of the things that you did was you actually, literally like in Jean-Claude Van Damme's Kickboxer, you banged your forearms against tree trunks, and got hard. I mean, talk about. I don't know. You got to talk about that. That's insane.
It's they have, you would do different things. Each monk had a specialty. They called them iron kung fus, because the idea is you would make one part of your body as hard as iron. So there was the iron head guy. The iron shin guy would do what Jean-Claude Van Damme did. He would kick tree trunks. I wanted to learn iron forearm because that seemed like the least dangerous thing, because the iron palm guys had these gnarly fists. So I learned iron forearm, and that's what you did. 30 minutes a day, you just banged your forearm against a tree trunk. And it was a lot like taking a hammer to a bruise. Like, you started in the first couple times, you're like, oh, okay, and then afterwards it was just pain, constant self-torture.
That's insanity.
But by the end, I could break branches, stabs over my forearms and not feel anything.
Now, I've read the book, so I know, but for those who have not read the book, tell us, what was the strangest iron form?
Yeah, it's in the subtitle.
Yeah.
Iron crotch. Actually, they call it golden egg, but I translated that as iron crotch. And there was one monk who even the other monks thought were nuts, and he could take a full kick to the groin. And I know because I had to kick him at a performance, and I kicked him so hard I actually bruised my foot on his balls.
Yeah, and you said you lifted him off the ground.
I did. I kicked him. I kicked at him, and he was like, "Is that all you got?" And I was like, "All right, buddy." So I kicked him so hard, I lifted him physically off the ground. And about the sixth kick, I felt my foot bruise, and I thought, "That's some hard testicles he's got there." But the amazing thing, two things. One, the way he trained is he actually would take out the family jewels and on a table and smack them in the morning for 30 minutes. Very different from most teenagers. And the other thing was that Chinese women just went insane for him. So he had like girlfriends everywhere. He was the stud of the Shaolin Temple.
Yeah,
because he was the Iron Crotch Master.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, can't even say it without laughing.
Right, I know. And just the stories that you tell in this are just fantastic. You went through. There were almost some gang fights with the monks in some rival schools. There were a couple times where you had to kind of go nuts as the crazy American in the marketplace, and then down you're returning the blender, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah. There was a grinder that broke on us the first day, and they didn't want to take it back, so I did. One of the Chinese guys says we're scared of foreigners because you're so emotional. We can't judge you. So he was like, do crazy foreigner kung fu. So I just acted like I was nuts, and the guy gave us a refund.
Yeah, and then at the hospital, which you described as an absolute nightmare, you had to go nuts there because was it John? I guess.
Yeah.
His finger messed up, his hand. That's what I guess he took a kick wrong, right? He was trying to catch the kick.
Yeah, he was catching the kick, and it split his finger open, and then there was no one else there at this crappy little hospital. It was basically where he went to die.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to do anything, and so I had to go nuts in order to get a doctor to come over. But what happened was there was this guy who came up who looked like a taxi cab driver, and he was smoking, and he was kind of looking at the wound and blowing smoke in the wound, and I just thought he was some random person, so I jacked him up against the wall, and I was like, in Chinese I said, Ni wei ni xie, which means, who the heck do you think you are? And he was like, I think I'm the doctor. I was like, oh, sorry. Go ahead, but could you not blow smoke in the wound? The level of care back then when I was there was pretty low. It's definitely improved since then. That's important to say.
Yeah.
But the rural areas of China are still, when we look at the Beijing Olympics and all those wonderful buildings, that's really the periphery. The heart of China is still very, very poor.
And if I remember correctly, to kind of quickly backtrack, you were the first American accepted in the Shaolin as a Shaolin disciple. Is that not correct?
That is true. I was back there in '92 when it just opened up to Westerners, and I was the only one for the longest time who stayed there. So it was just I was kind of a 6-foot-tall, skinny white guy walking around, and eventually I stayed there long enough. They kind of made me a mascot and accepted me as the first American ever to be a disciple of the temple, and the abbot of the temple is my master.
Yeah, and amazing. I'm just telling you, every page is filled with a story. It literally, you say that sometimes. Oh, it's a real page turner. But I banged out both books in probably a couple days each because I couldn't put them down. I couldn't go to sleep at night because I'm like, I got to find out what happens next. This challenge match is coming up, and not to be a spoiler, but there's a challenge match. Basically, another master he was from Japan, right?
Yeah, there was one from Japan, and there was one. The one I fought was from northern China.
Right,
and he was a master of a different style, and he wanted to challenge the Shaolin monks, and they got really upset because it's rude to go into somebody else's school and say like, I think you guys suck so badly I could beat all of you.
Right.
But they wanted to. Everyone wanted to fight him, and so I said, trying to join along and seem like good-spirited guy, sure, I'll fight him too. And I assumed, of course, they wouldn't let me because I was just a beginner and a foreigner. But they thought the best way to test this guy's skill was to throw me as kind of cannon fodder against him, because if I lost, they wouldn't lose any face because everyone knows foreigners don't know any kung fu.
Right.
So I was like the canary in the coal mine.
Right.
Yeah, and can you say, I don't know if you want to spoil it or not. Do you want to tell people the results?
No, absolutely. This one, there's a couple other fights too, but yes, I ended up winning the challenge match. I surprised him. I had really long arms, and so I surprised him, punched him in the face until he bled and gave up.
Yeah.
And after that, they really That's the change. That's the moment when they started to accept me as a member of the temple.
Yeah, that's outstanding. You were crushing him with, I think it was the left hook, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was just fake low, hit high.
There you go. And yeah, you learn a lot about Chinese kickboxing and that sort of thing as well. Is it wushu? Is that how you say it properly?
Wushu is general. That means martial arts,
Right.
and sanda is specific to
Right,
kickboxing.
sanda,
But
okay.
the term wushu goes for everything.
Yeah, I was trying to say the words properly in my head as I was reading the book, but I know you said there, if you say something in a sort of higher octave, it has a different meaning and that sort of thing. So I'm like, I wonder how this is actually said. And again, the name that they gave you, can you pronounce that again as well?
Yeah, the name that was Balmosu,
Mm-hmm.
and that was my Chinese name. And then after a while, they called me Lao Bao, which is a kind of nickname, which is Honorable Bao, which is what the nickname they gave me after I was at the Shaolin Temple for a while.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a joke. I mean, you didn't just show up and they kicked you out. I mean, you actually earned their respect. I mean, if there was one guy that as America we needed to send to the Shaolin Temple, clearly it was you. But and I'm dead serious with that. And it really comes through in the book. Again, we're talking about American Shaolin. We're here with Matthew Polly. The respect that you have and the awe that you have for these monks. But also interesting to note, I think that it's not they're not, the monks are celibate, but they do go out and party sometimes, and sometimes they're not all celibate, and they do drink a lot and that kind of thing. It's not like I thought it would be,
Yeah, me too. I mean, you have this image of these perfect monks who only study kung fu and they're Buddhist scholars, but many of them were simply poor kids whose family couldn't afford them, and the monastery was almost like an orphanage for many of them.
Yeah.
And so they're 14, 15, 16, and they think like normal 14, 15, 16-year-olds. They start to fall in love with girls. They're not really sure if they want to continue being Buddhist. At the Shaolin Temple, you're actually allowed to drink alcohol. That's the one Buddhist temple where you are, and sometimes they go out and party too much and get into fights like boys do, and then they get scolded by the older masters. So in many ways, they were special, but they also were very human, and I wanted to capture both, the ways in which they were special and the ways they were just like every other teenage kids that you see anywhere else.
And again, you had a list that you can't constantly refer to in the book of things that you wanted to accomplish, or things that are wrong with Matt is what you called it. And you wanted to become a badass and that sort of thing, become a man instead of a boy. And at one point, for your friend, you actually confront a mafia member, an Asian mafia member, and I mean, you just basically went up to his representative and said, "Leave my buddy alone," and that's the end of it. And it was.
Yeah, that was a crazy story. Like, looking back on it, I don't know what I was thinking, but
Clearly.
yeah, I had like a knife and a 9-section whip, and went up there, and I was like, "You got to leave him alone, buddy. He's my guy." I think they were just so freaked out that this American came up there that's what settled it. But by the end of one of the great things about going to the Shaolin Temple and living through this experience is the confidence that it builds by doing something difficult.
I would imagine.
And training hard and suffering.
Difficult. Yeah, that has to be an understatement, I would say.
Yeah.
Now let's shift gears again. That's American Shaolin. Get this book. I'm telling you, you'll bang right through it, and you will call us up and thank us. It's an incredible book for anyone. In fact, a lot of my friends have winter reading lists and that kind of stuff. Hey, what should I read or whatever? And I've been recommending your book to everyone, as well as the next one we're about to talk about, Tapped Out. So, Colonel, pick it up.
Now, I personally am a huge fan of Michael Crichton. He's been the only author until this point that I could sit down and start a book and not put it down. And I'm going to be completely honest with you here. You have now been added to that list.
Oh, man, I'm on the Michael Crichton list. That's awesome.
You're up there with Michael Crichton. But seriously, this book, Tapped Out, the way you write it, the way you tell your stories, you're a storyteller. And you have such a good sense of humor about it that you write the story, you write the book in a way that everyone can understand, whether they've been in martial arts or whether they have no idea what a kick is.
Right.
You write it for that. And this humor comes through so much. What do you think? I mean, does this seem to be just your personal style? Is that the type of books you want to read if you're reading? Or
the funny thing is when you write books, people assume that you read a lot of them, but most books I read, I have the same reaction you do. And by the way, I love Michael Crichton for the same reason. When I picked him. I started reading him when I was at the Shaolin Temple, actually.
Really?
And you pick one up and you read it and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And you pick up another one, you read it, and you can't put it down. And so I wanted to write books that people who don't actually read a lot of books want to read.
Yeah.
And
Mission
I
accomplished.
often find that you start a book and everyone says it's great, and you get about 50, 100 pages into it, and you're like, I'm bored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When's he going to finish this thing?
Right.
So I really, the way I wanted to tell stories was a way that keep people engaged. And particularly when you're writing kind of martial arts related, a lot of your audience are going to be young men, and young men tend to play video games and watch movies. They don't read as many books, and so you want to keep them as engaged as possible. So thank you for saying that. That's definitely was my goal, is to, write a story where you want to know what happens next. And by the time you're done, you're surprised that it's over and kind of sad.
Yeah, like I said, I want to hear. I need a third book. I need it to come out quickly because I need more stories. And you talked about eating bitter is what the Chinese called it. You went through all of this again. Now, the Colonel and I have both trained in MMA. We did it for 2 or 3 years. So
Wow.
everything, I was reading through it. I was like, oh yeah, been through that. Oh yeah, threw that up. Yeah, and it really is insane. And you decided to go through all of that again with several more years under your belt, and went through it all again. And again, you don't know the path of least resistance, my man. I mean, you went to Henzo Gracie's school. You went to Phil Nurse.
Right.
You went to Thailand.
Extreme Couture.
Yeah, and Extreme Couture. Now, you did get to train with Gina Carano. So
Yeah, that's right.
That was nice.
Every day I'd be kind of studying there and see Gina, and I was like, this isn't so bad.
Yeah, right. Before we get really in depth talking about Tapped Out, I just want to say it's amazing your comfort level with going outside of your comfort level. And by that I mean you just pick up and go to China for 2 years,
Right.
in the middle of nowhere. You just pick up and leave for months to go do everything you did in Tapped Out. But here's the biggest thing. Here's the most dangerous thing that I think you have done in your entire life that I've read about. You've done all of these challenge matches and confronted mafia members and all. But in this book, you leave your newlywed, your wife, and tell her, hey, baby, I got to go live in Vegas for 6 months.
Yes, you got it on the head. If anybody was going to kill me over all these adventures, it was her. The day I told her that I was leaving her right after we got married to go to Vegas and train.
That's the biggest challenge match right there. I mean,
I'm telling you, I spent a lot of time in the doghouse for that one.
I would imagine.
But fortunately, things turned out all right, and she accepted me back. But that was probably the riskiest thing I've ever done. So for all the men who are just getting married, don't do what I did. Read about it, but don't do it, because it's crazy.
But you would recommend that for men getting divorced?
Yes. You want to make sure that it ends on a quick note.
There you go.
Go hang out and train with Gina Carano. That's leave your newlywed. That's the best way to do it.
No kidding.
Especially Vegas too. That was the other thing is, she was like, "Why don't you go to like Bettendorf, Iowa?"
Right.
And I'm like, "No, Bettendorf sucks. I'm going to Vegas." She's like, "I can't tell my mother you're going to Vegas." I'm like, "Why?" Oh, okay. So
yeah, I'd much rather be in Vegas than Bettendorf, Iowa. Now, the other thing too I love about the book is your comparisons, the way you talk about things. Like you even mentioned that at one point you said martial arts, when you were growing up was regional, you thought, and that you compared it to like Dungeons and Dragons. I laughed out loud so hard for probably 2 minutes when I read that, because I'm sitting there thinking about it. I grew up in a place where literally the only thing around was farms. So I know exactly what you're talking about. When there's nothing to do, you find little regional, little sects of people, and they have their things that they do. None of them were martial arts.
Right.
So, it's just funny to read that, and the fact that I love the fact that you called Affliction T-shirts, their style was Gothic Puke. That, again, just little things. And it's so funny to be reading a book and just sitting there quiet, and then all of a sudden just bust out laughing.
Yeah, I did the
People
same
are looking
as well.
at you like you're crazy.
I was, yeah, absolutely. And again, Gothic Puke, that's a Princeton education, folks.
I'm telling you.
you too, with a fine education, can come up with those kind of phrasing.
That's right. That's what those Ivy League schools will bring to you. And again, you go through crazy adventures in this. You travel all over the world, and most people, if they're an MMA fan or if they've even heard of the sport or the UFC, they know who George St. Pierre is.
Right.
And, you train with him a little bit. You actually go out and get hammered with him at one point.
Mm-hmm.
You train with some of his big instructors like John Danaher, who was actually his assistant coach on The Ultimate Fighter, and just some of the greatest masters in the world. I know you can't pick a favorite. What was the most challenging and what was the most rewarding?
The biggest, the hardest part for me was when I was training in New York. It was sort of, once, twice a day.
Right.
But the training camp itself, when I went to Vegas and I was supposed to be an 8-week training camp, and my coach there, Joey Varner, who was the coach for Gray Maynard in his last fight against Frankie Edgar, looked at me and it was like, dude, you need to do a training camp to do a training camp.
Right.
You need to get in shape to get in shape. You're not even ready. Like, most guys are ready for their training camps. You're way beyond. So the hardest part for me was training camps because there's no break. And the constant pressure where you're going to have to fight, and the psychological pressure where you have to get in the ring. And you end up training hurt. You go in when you're hurt, you're tired, you're exhausted, and then you have to get beat up again. That was the hardest thing to do, is to do it when you don't want to do it. Oftentimes, when I was younger, you go once or twice a week and train, but doing it every day, especially at this point, I was 38 years old, and so the body just doesn't recover like it used to when I was younger. So, and I ended up getting in the ring with a 23-year-old, so I was like this. He could have been my kid, and I had to get in there and smack him around. So
and again,
that was the challenging part for me.
And again, you're not just with a lot of novices. I mean, some of the guys you trained with and sparred with. One guy was the Irish kickboxing champion.
Exactly.
You're in there with Mike Pyle. You're in there. Forrest Griffin, Vitor Belfort. These guys are training at this gym. I mean, the top fighters in the world.
Right.
Yeah. And Randy Couture's son was my sparring partner,
right.
Ryan Couture, who's turned pro and done very well. So. It was. I'd get in there, and every day you knew that no matter what, you were going to get beat up because the guys were just better than I was. So, you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh no, it's like going to an execution every single day. But that's how you get better. And as they say, train hard, fight easy.
Right.
And taking that punishment in the training is what makes a fight happen easier, and you don't want to go easy on yourself in training because, you won't be ready when it happens.
That's true, because that's one thing I've always been told. If you want to get better, you play against people who are better than you.
Right.
And I firmly believe that, and I learned a lot of that when I was training. Unfortunately, a lot of the time I was just stuck training with E, so I didn't learn too much here.
Listen, he got tapped out by guillotines all the time.
For the first month, that's it.
He fell into that deep choke, huh?
Yeah, he's like you. He's a kickboxer, though. He's got heavy legs.
See, and that was the other thing I was going to say, too, was you had the fortunate ability to go into this as a underweight kid or underweight guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas I came into MMA as an overweight guy, which
right.
It just absolutely wreaks havoc on your cardio.
Yeah, sort of a Roy Nelson type body build on him.
Yeah. I'm actually growing the Roy Nelson beard.
Fedor Emelianenko, you're straight up Roy.
Yeah,
Big country. Huh?
Oh, I'm straight. It's big country. I'm like a little version of big country, just a little bit smaller, and not nearly as talented.
But just as country.
But probably more country. Actually, I don't know. I don't walk around doing a truffle shuffle like he does. Now, one of the things when people find a writing style, and I can't help but cue in so much on how the way you write the book, the way you tell the stories. When people find out a writer's style, they like to try to transfer that. Let's say, and I'm not trying to make a comparison here because I don't want to compare the two of you like this, but Tucker Max. People honed in on his style and immediately wanted to turn that into a movie or turn that into something, a TV show. Mm-hmm. Any plans of that in the works?
Well, definitely. I mean, the wonderful thing you want when you're a writer is to get paid twice for the same work.
Yes, you do, right?
So yeah, Tucker Max. Some people compared me to him just in the sense of kind of wild and crazy. Although I don't think I'm quite as rude to women as he is.
Not at all.
I read some of his stuff and I was like, dude, you really are going to hell.
Right?
He is.
But
they serve
right now they're in the process of trying to turn American Shaolin into a TV series.
Excellent.
So I'm working with the writer, who's a kind of big time Hollywood writer, and you never know. people make lots of promises in Hollywood, but
Right.
it's nice. It's nice to have the attention and the interest, and for me, it'd be great to see both get turned in. MMA is so hot now, so we're working with some. Sony is interested in buying the rights to it, so we'll see. We're definitely trying to see it get into other medium.
And honestly, I could see Tapped Out being a show that's put in on like FX, especially since they now have the Ultimate Fighter coming to FX and UFC's on Fox. I could see a version of Tapped Out being on FX before or after the Ultimate Fighter, and done almost like a comedy.
Yeah,
because
I would love to see it as like the King of Queens.
Yeah, okay.
That kind of the overweight middle-aged guy who wants to be an MMA fighter, and his wife,
Okay.
he just married, thinks he's crazy.
Who do you want to play you then?
Kevin James, I actually think would be funny.
And he has an MMA background.
He does. He
Yeah.
does. He's trained at Extreme Couture. He loves the sport, and he goes out there. I think he's working on his own project, so I don't know if we could seduce him over with the book, but we're going to try. But yeah, he would be funny. Who's the guy on How I Met Your Mother?
Which one? The lead
the
character?
taller one.
Oh, Jason Segel.
Yeah, Jason Segel.
He
He
would
would
be
be great
good.
too, as that kind of goofy, kind of dorky, awkward, but charming.
Everybody has their own opinion, I guess, because I was thinking Rampage Jackson to play you. But if you don't think that works, then...
I love Rampage because he's hilarious, and he's he's crazy too. He's definitely he can go off the wall. So him, or obviously I look a little like Brad Pitt, people say, but no.
Or he looks like you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He aspires to be as good looking as me.
Again, talking with Matthew Polly, author of both American Shaolin and Tapped Out. And I have to say, I actually read them in the reverse order, but it didn't make a difference. They're both incredible. It gives you more background, but it's just an amazing story. And if they do get made into movies, TV shows, we will definitely love to have you back on and talk more about that. It would be incredible.
Anytime, guys. This was a fun interview, and I really do appreciate the attention you paid to it, and frankly, just getting fans who read the books. It's great to hear. Because sometimes when you write them and you're done, you think, was that worth it? So it's great to hear it was.
Now, do you have any plans for future books or another crazy tale? Now, you said that your mom was really kind of disappointed, not disappointed, but upset because you keep putting yourself in harm's way.
She does. She was like, "Don't you ever?" She was crying after the final fight. She was like, "Don't you ever do this to me again?"
And your dad was pretty pissed, So, would you do something like this again, or your family, your wife is on her last?
I'm gonna have to work on her a little bit. I think she needs a little break. I joked that I would do lucha libre. I'm gonna go out and be like, El Esposo Estrangulador, the wife strangler.
Yeah.
So something this is kind of the thing I do, and it's interesting. But you don't want to be like the old guy at the bar. You don't want to be too old to do it. But I think I'm going to do something on Bruce Lee.
Ooh.
Some sort of biography about him, and maybe do some participatory stuff as well.
Wow.
Because that's who I wanted to be when I was growing up. Watch Enter the Dragon. Bruce Lee was the fantasy when I was a kid. So I think there's something there that I'm going to work on.
That would be amazing.
If that doesn't work out for you, you can always join a Mexican drug cartel and try to,
the only thing more dangerous than MMA.
Let's go with a Colombian drug cartel. That'll be a little more extreme for you. You put yourself in harm's way.
Yeah. Now, again, getting back to Tapped Out, though, and again, telling the stories of the big fights that happen. Don't give away spoilers because there's so much to the story. But both books you kind of start with walking into the fights and it's about to happen. Then you go through the background to everything. Then you get to the fight, and then you tell what happened afterwards and where those people are and that sort of thing. So you end up fighting David Sexton, and you can actually see the video on YouTube. It's out there, and I've seen it. But the way you describe the fight is incredible, and what it feels like to get your bell rung. When you kicked in the head, punch in the head, and that sort of thing, and how you describe it is it feels like it takes minutes where it's only seconds. And incredibly, you actually get one of your contacts knocked out in the fight, continue to fight, much to the doctor's dismay, and win.
Yeah, it was shocking to me. Like, I didn't even think about the fact that I wore contacts and that I'm basically legally blind without them. But right in the middle, he scraped me with this hook with, those 4-ounce gloves aren't rounded like boxing gloves.
Right.
And the contact goes out, so I've lost all peripheral vision, so I can't see his hooks coming, and all depth perception, so I can't, when a jab's coming out, I can't tell how close it is, except by looking the bend at his elbow. And it was at that moment I was like, you really need to finish this fight.
Right.
He's going to knock you out. And it was one of those fights where we were both amateurs. This was our first MMA fight. But that's the amazing thing I love about MMA is you never know. With those small little gloves, you never know what's going to happen. You might have 10 years more experience, but they catch you with the right punch, it's over. And he clipped me with one where the entire room went dark. And I could hear the bell ring, and I couldn't see my corner. And so I was walking forward, and I put my hands out, and in my head, this was like a horror movie. It took like 10 minutes. And all I could think was, just, you will touch a ring rope, a ring is square, turn right, and you will eventually find your corner. So I thought it was like being in a horror movie. It turned out, when I re-looked at the video, it took like a second and a half. I turned the wrong way, and the ref pointed me to the right way, and I was in the corner. But in my head, after getting my bell rung like that, I didn't know where I was. And I think it was the great thing about doing the book like this is when you watch fights and you see a fighter fall down or he can't get up or he seems confused and you think, get up, you wussy.
Right.
You don't know what it's like when you're really getting rung like that. And so I had a lot greater sympathy for just how tough these guys are.
That's absolutely right. And, the main thing is you just got to keep on persevering. No matter what, you got to push yourself to that limit, and once you find that limit, go deeper. I mean, seriously, and I think that's a lot of what you showed throughout the books as well, that when you feel like you've hit your physical and emotional limit, you've got to find just a little bit more and just keep going. And finally, Matt, what is the song you would want to hear ideally? If you were a UFC fighter and you're walking out to the cage, what is the song you would want to be playing while you're walking down to the octagon?
The UFC fight. Because this is a Matt Hughes song, and I'm not the biggest fan of Matt Hughes, but I love, because I grew up in Kansas, I love Hank Williams Jr., A Country Boy Can Survive.
That's right, yeah. Well, Hughes is retiring soon, hopefully, again. So you can always take that up. Here's what I propose. Dana White, if you're listening, or Joe Silver, any of those guys, let's get Matthew Polly as a downloadable character in Undisputed 3.
Let's make that happen.
There we are, buddy.
That's what I'm talking about.
Let's
Get
make
your
that
agent
happen.
on that. That would be awesome. I would play it all the time as you. That would be so sick.
My fantasy, though, is that they would have a special add-on where they have just the journalists who cover MMA. we could get Ariel Helwani and Ben Focals and all the guys, because all the journalists who cover MMA actually do jiu-jitsu and stuff. So we should have a secondary add-on addition to Ultimate Fighter 3.
You think Joe Rogan would rule over everybody? Or
I remember watching him back in the old days when he covered the UFC. His neck and head have gotten so much bigger. I don't know what spinach he's been eating, but you look at him and he's when he gets excited, he makes me scared. So, yes, his jiu-jitsu apparently is excellent, and he studies with everyone. I would not want to roll with Joe Rogan. I think he would, and he's got a Taekwondo background. I'm pretty sure that guy's tough. And, if he didn't, he'd just start telling, really lewd jokes to you in your ear, and you'd crack up, and that would be it. So
Joe Rogan, man.
Who wins in a fight then, you or John Anik?
Now him I kill.
There you go.
That's good.
Yeah, if I can't take John Anik, I really shouldn't have spent training for 2 years.
That's a good point. I'll say, and again, the website is mattpoly.com. And you can go in there. You can find all about appearances that you're doing. You can buy the books, which are at Barnes & Noble, Amazon,
anywhere,
iTunes,
you can buy books.
Pretty much anywhere. Yeah, and again, American Shaolin and Tapped Out. Buy both of these books. They're not expensive books, and Tapped Out actually just came out in November. So out in hardback, brand new book, dropped on November 17th. And American Shaolin's been out for several years, but love them both. And they're, the funny thing is, they're actually good as rereads.
Yeah,
I'm planning to reread these books. Yeah, totally. So Maybe I'll buy them again for you, Matt. How about that?
There we go.
There you
Give
go.
away as gifts.
There you go.
No, this is great. Tell all your friends.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for writing the books with the humor and telling the story. But thank you, because I think they are the kind of thing that you could even give a teenager, or somebody who's at the reading level that can understand the books, because I think you're a good example for someone, learning to be a man and that kind of thing. And if somebody was bullied, or if they just want to learn the discipline of martial arts, I think the way you approach it with humility and a lot of respect for the monks, for all of your teachers in Tapped Out, for your opponents. You talked about David Sexton, how you kind of chit-chatted with him at the weigh-ins, which you said was awkward, which I assume it would be. And, the Chinese champion that you fought in American Shaolin, you talked with him a little bit in Chinese, and you said he was a nice guy, but that you do that and you don't try to, punk people out or, big time anybody. I just think that's a great example.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to make that point, I think it's important that most people don't understand that it's an honor when somebody's willing to step into the ring with you and test you and let you show how much you have. And it's not out of anger or any kind of violence. It's really to test your skill. And so after I got done with those fights, I really liked and respected the guys who got in there and knocked me around. And there were several of them who beat me. So
who did so, yeah.
So it wasn't always just because I won that I felt good about it. So it really is an honor to David Sexton and the rest of them. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, again, American Shaolin, Tapped Out, where you can buy books or ebooks. Go get them. Matthew Polly, support this guy, mattpolily.com. Matt, we appreciate it, and we will be back here in a few minutes on Across the Board with Ian the Colonel on hawkradio.org.
And acrosstheboardradio.com.
All right, Matt, that is the interview portion that you need to stop seeing. And again, Matt, we really, really, really appreciate the time today.